Bill Maher took aim at Melania Trump and Laura Loomer in his latest scathing monologue, following a shocking leak about Donald Trump. The comedian didn't hold back, delivering a brutal roast that targeted both women, mocking their roles and personalities with biting humor. Maher's jokes dug into Melania's awkward marriage to the former president, while also skewering Loomer's controversial stances. The leaked information only fueled Maher's fire, giving him fresh material to lampoon Trump's world in his signature unfiltered style. The roast quickly went viral, leaving viewers in stitches and Trump's camp scrambling to respond. Setting the stage, a catalog model and the Slovenian roots, Bill Maher's roast of Melania. Trump started with what seemed like a playful jab, yet this was only the beginning of a much sharper comedic exploration. Maher initially referenced Melania's past as a catalog model, saying, "I was a catalog model. You know, the kind of model you order out of a catalog." On the surface, this might have seemed like light-hearted humor, a simple poke at her modeling career. However, the tone quickly darkened, setting the stage for a relentless roast that was as much about her personal history as it was about her public persona. The quip was harmless in isolation, but Maher's focus soon shifted to Melania's Slovenian heritage. This, too, became fodder for his humor. He quipped that Melania had graced the cover of Eastern European Brides Monthly, implying that she was one of the many women who were seen as available for an American man. The audience's laughter was indicative of a more nuanced joke, one that spoke to the perception of Melania as a foreigner who had entered the spotlight via her marriage to Donald Trump. While Maher acknowledged her success in making the cover, it was clear that his remarks weren't just playful banter. They were underscored by a subtle critique of her past and the image of her marriage that had captivated the media. From First Lady to First Punchline. As Maher's set continued, his humor became more biting and the punches landed faster. It was clear that Melania Trump was not only a target of his jokes, but the subject of a larger commentary about her role in American politics. Maher didn't hold back in addressing her public initiatives and the contradictions within her public persona. One of the most prominent topics Maher mocked was her anti-bullying campaign, Be Best. Maher sarcastically remarked that it was strange to hear a message about cyberbullying coming from the spouse of a man whose online tirades were infamous. Trump's Twitter account, filled with insults, rants, and name-calling, stood in stark contrast to the noble message Melania was trying to convey. Maher's sarcastic delivery made the irony impossible to ignore, and his audience seemed to appreciate the contradiction as a prime example of the spectacle that her role as First Lady had become. The Trump marriage, a gilded cage. The most memorable aspect of Maher's roast, however, was his focus on Melania's marriage to Donald Trump. Publicly, the Trumps have often appeared distant from one another, with many speculating about the nature of their relationship. This became prime material for Maher, who didn't shy away from exploring the uncomfortable reality of their public appearances. Maher jokingly described Melania's special talent as holding her breath for 90 seconds. A metaphorical skill, he suggested, that she needed to survive her life in the gilded cage of Trump Tower. The crowd's laughter was indicative of a deep recognition of the strained and often uncomfortable nature of the Trump marriage. This wasn't just a marriage built on love, but rather one with financial and social implications. Maher's remark encapsulated the sense that Melania's public persona was more about survival than affection. In a particularly biting moment, Maher declared that Melania's favorite movie was The Great Escape, a tongue-in-cheek reference to the theory that she felt trapped in her marriage. Following this, he claimed her favorite song was Born Free by Andy Williams, a sardonic nod to the idea that, if Melania could, she would escape her circumstances. These jokes cut deep, suggesting that behind Melania's polished image lay a woman who may have felt confined rather than liberated by her position as the wife of the most powerful man in the world. Melania's public persona under fire. As Maher turned his attention to Melania's public image, the laughs became more pointed. In a moment of ruthless humor, Maher presented a hypothetical Melania quote, "I hope I inspire little girls everywhere to marry for money." The joke, though exaggerated, hit at the heart of the public's view of her marriage to Donald Trump. To many, Melania's role in the relationship was seen as less about love and more about securing financial stability and social status. The remark echoed the sentiment that, for Melania, marrying Trump might have been a pragmatic choice rather than a romantic one. Maher's jabs continued as he mocked Melania's taste in reading materials and television. He quipped that her favorite book was "He's Just Not That Into You," while suggesting that she binge-watched 90 Day Fiancé for relationship advice. These remarks reinforced the idea that Melania's marriage to Trump was more about navigating a complex political and social environment than about genuine affection. To Maher, Melania was less a first lady and more a woman trapped in a strategic arrangement. A marriage rulebook, the Trump Manual. In a stroke of comedic brilliance, Maher then introduced the concept of a marriage manual for the Trumps. He humorously suggested that their relationship was governed by a no-touching policy so strict that even Vice President Mike Pence would find it extreme. This was a nod to Pence's infamous Billy Graham rule, which states that he would never be alone with a woman other than his wife. Maher's exaggeration of this rule painted a picture of a marriage not based on physical affection, but on an unspoken set of rules that served the interests of both parties. One of the most memorable moments of the night came when Maher imagined what would happen if Donald Trump ever said to Melania, "I love you." According to Maher, her response would likely be, "You're welcome." The delivery of this joke was perfect, capturing the transactional nature of their marriage, which had been often speculated upon in the media. For Maher, the Trumps' relationship was less a romantic partnership than a mutually beneficial arrangement. To cap off his roast, Maher likened their marriage to a nature documentary. He humorously narrated a scene. Here we see the rare Trump in its natural habitat, attempting to display affection. Notice how the female Trump skillfully avoids eye contact. The joke landed hard, with the audience laughing at the many awkward and uncomfortable moments between the Trumps that had been captured by the media. Maher's satirical take on their public displays of affection painted a picture of a relationship that was, at best, strained and, at worst, deeply uncomfortable. Secret Service code names, a brutal insult. Bill Maher's roast of Melania. Trump reached new heights of audacity when he turned his attention to the Secret Service code names assigned to the Trumps. Code names are traditionally given to high-profile figures for security purposes, and Maher didn't miss the opportunity to twist these names into fodder for sharp humor. Donald Trump's official code name, Mogul, became a prime target for Maher. The humor was rooted in the apparent exaggeration of the title, as Maher compared it to calling a squirrel a lumberjack. The metaphor perfectly captured the farcical nature of Trump's self-perception as a business titan, especially when weighed against the backdrop of his multiple bankruptcies and financial missteps. The joke was a dig at Trump's inflated ego, contrasting the reality of his financial history with the grandeur implied by the code name. For Maher, Mogul was emblematic of Trump's self-image, which stood in stark contrast to his actual business record. Trump may have presented himself as a savvy and unassailable mogul, but the truth, constantly challenged in the media and by critics, was something altogether different. But it was Melania's supposed code name that truly took the roast to another level. Maher joked that her designation was, "that poor, poor woman." The punchline cut to the heart of how many people perceived Melania's role in the Trump saga. It portrayed her as a figure of silent suffering, perhaps resigned to a life she hadn't chosen, trapped in the larger narrative of Donald Trump's political ambitions. The audience erupted in laughter because, beneath the humor, was a biting critique of Melania's public persona, an image of a woman who seemed to passively endure her role as the wife of the controversial president. The absurdity of a Secret Service code name becoming a representation of her perceived plight made it one of Maher's most savage jabs. Trump's meltdown, a PR disaster. The impact of Maher's roast didn't end with the audience's laughter or the viral clips circulating on social media. As expected, Donald Trump, with his notoriously thin skin when it comes to criticism, lashed out at the remarks. Known for his ability to dish out insults, often on social media, Trump's inability to take a joke became a spectacle in its own right. His immediate demand for an apology demonstrated a deep irony. A man who has spent much of his life attacking others was suddenly unable to endure the sharp edge of humor aimed at his own family. Trump's response only served to amplify Maher's jokes. His overreaction ensured that the roast would remain in the public eye far longer than it might have otherwise. The comedy special, which would have likely faded into memory like many other political roasts, instead exploded across social media platforms. Clips from Maher's set went viral, and every detail of the president's angry response was dissected by the media. The backlash from Trump only turned the spotlight brighter, causing Maher's jokes to gain even more traction than they might have had the president remained silent. This was a textbook example of the Streisand effect, the phenomenon in which efforts to suppress or hide something only draw more attention to it. Trump's demand for an apology and his public meltdown about the roast only guaranteed that Maher's jabs would have a much longer shelf life. His reaction ensured that the joke wouldn't fade away. Instead, it became more memorable, more embedded in the public consciousness. The role of comedy in political discourse. Maher's roast of the Trumps was more than just an entertaining monologue. It was a masterclass in the power of comedy as political commentary. In an age where scandals and controversies dominate the news cycle, comedy can serve as a potent tool for piercing the carefully curated images of public figures. While political leaders may spin their own narratives in speeches and media appearances, there's little that can deflate a public persona faster than a well-timed joke that exposes the contradictions and absurdities of that image. For Donald Trump, who has built his public persona on bravado, dominance, and an unshakable belief in his own greatness, being the subject of a brutal roast was particularly damaging. Trump has spent much of his life belittling others, from his public feuds with celebrities to his years of insults directed at political opponents. But when Maher's humor turned the tables and placed Trump in the role of the target, it exposed a vulnerability that Trump was unwilling to acknowledge. Trump's inability to laugh at himself, something many politicians can do, even if begrudgingly, only reinforced the very critiques that Maher was making. It painted a picture of a man who couldn't take the same heat he so often dished out. The roast was a reminder that, for all his power and influence, Trump was just as human and just as susceptible to criticism as anyone else. When Maher targeted his ego, his inability to handle the roast became a metaphor for the fragility of his self-image. Melania's role in the jokes added an additional layer of complexity to the roast. While Maher's criticisms were harsh, they also offered a lens into the peculiar dynamics of the Trump marriage. As the target of jokes about her silent suffering code name and the transactional nature of her public persona, Melania's portrayal as a reluctant participant in the political spectacle only made the satire more poignant. Maher's jokes weren't just about her. They were about the larger cultural narrative surrounding the Trumps, their relationship, and their roles in the political theater.